Hey guys, Saf coming at you with another Raid Shadow Legends video. This week we're going to be doing another unofficial patch notes breakdown for patch 5.1 that went live on Thursday. I was going to be waiting until Monday to do this, where we would look at all the champions at the same time that they're releasing. However, due to just recent changes and a couple of things, I felt like it's better to split this up into part 1 and part 2 because there are things in the patch that have not been announced that I think should have been announced, and I want to go through them. So the first thing we're going to be doing in this video is obviously looking at the official patch notes and then going into anything that they've changed behind the scenes that they haven't told us about, or elaborating on the things that they have. So let's take a look. So we had the patch notes come through. Let's take a look. Now, obviously the big feature of this patch is the Chaos Ore that was added to the game. Now, I'm not going to go through it in too much detail. I think Hellhades has covered it pretty well in this video, and I sort of helped him out with some math on it. I actually think it's a very good addition. It's not perfect. In an ideal world, we would be able to specify reroll just my substats or just my primary stats. However, where the odds of you actually getting some of these really high value pieces to begin with are so low, the fact that we can rework and hope almost get like a free shot at another chance just gives us more options to reduce some of the grind in the game. So I think in its current form, depending on how available the Chaos Ore is, I actually think it's a pretty good addition to the game. New filters added to the game, this is good. It just helps us manage it. Then we've got some champion rebalances. So, Rotus change. Now, some people might be thinking this is actually a buff to Rotus. Well, I was talking to a few players, and actually they said it's probably a bit of a nerf. And the reason why they say this is normally max HP, because the bosses generally have a lot of high HP, you want stuff like War Master, HP burn, it helps do damage. Well, if you decrease their max HP, that also by effect decreases the War Master and HP burn damage. And poison damage for that fact if they've not got any weird passives. So by reducing max HP on Rotus, you're essentially making the fight last longer, for a better word. So whether it's actually going to make a big difference is left to be seen, but it's not a buff in that sense. It's just a case of They've kind of picked the champions, except for Urost, where the max HP on this skill didn't affect bosses. Now, I'm going to be covering the passive in detail because right now, Plarium have said it's working as intended. They even came out on the Raid Digest to say it's working as intended. And I can pretty much confidently show it's 100% not, and it doesn't take much effort. So I don't really know what the hell is going on in Plarium right now. We'll cover this in a second. But just as a note, obviously, it never used to work against Scarab King. Now it does, so he's actually quite good. And then obviously they must have just done a bit of a scan and realised Blood's Gorge speed was really low, so they've just upped him to being more in line with other champions. So what other changes have they made? They've added 100 more slots. The price is ridiculous. We will cover that in a second. I've got a breakdown of all the different prices to show how things have changed over time. I love this line. This line is brilliant. Dramatically overhauled. Now, dramatically is a big word to start with. Dramatically overhauled the visual representation of shadows below Fane's jawline and chin region to be more in line with the true artistic vision. I mean, come on. What is that? Okay, so to me that's either someone managed to hijack the patch notes and stick that line in, or it's an inside joke with Plarium, or someone in the art department really wants recognition this patch. Whichever, that's just silly. And when you see some of the changes they have announced, you'll see why I'm so almost embarrassed by this line. Change the XP brew icon to make it different from the XP barrel icon. Now, I've looked in the game, I cannot see any difference. So I don't know if anyone can point this out to me in the comments, but I cannot see what they've changed to make this different at all. Fixed a bug that prevented Hydra from stopping champions being put into the sparring pit. That was a welcome change. I mean, I don't know why that was a bug for so long. Fixed a bug that allowed champions to decrease the Demon Lord's max HP. I'm not entirely sure what this is related to be honest, because they almost said that you could do it, but you can't do it, and it was never possible, but it is possible, so it should never be possible. So that brings us to the end of the official patch notes. Let's just break down some of the changes they haven't told you about. So the first thing I want to cover is there was a little secret that I've been holding back, because I knew the moment I would mention anything about it, Plarium would bug fix it instantly. There was a bug within Doom Tower where certain floors on normal and hard, I think it was 13 and 49, essentially gave you hero XP, so XP towards your champions. Not a lot, but considering you could run this without any cost, it was essentially free XP. They basically left it in, you know, every stage has like an account XP and a hero XP in in the data, they left it with 500 instead of zeroing. And then obviously when they created different rotations, they must have just copied the structure and retained that bug without checking. So it meant you could run it over and over again. It was never intended, because that's why you never saw the visualizations of the level up. But if you ran something like a Skull Crown or a Sinacia, you could run it overnight. And unfortunately, that has now been bug fixed the moment Hellhades mentioned to the world that it could be possible. So no more free XP on Doom Tower, which, to be honest, I'm not upset about. I mean, it shouldn't have been there to some extent, but it was nice to get a bit of free XP. The other thing that they have changed, and I think this is massively egregious that they have not mentioned this anywhere in the patch notes or the raid digest, but we have obviously been fighting Hydra. We all kind of hate Hydra. We're not really getting on well with it. And a big part of Hydra, the problem you have is you can solve the mechanics, but you cannot deal damage once you've solved the mechanics. Now, the idea of the mechanics is in place is when you kill a head, it enters a decapitated state. And in this state, it takes increased damage. When it was released, it was stated to be 200% increased damage. Well, it was never actually 200% now that we've looked at it. In this change, in this patch notes, they've increased the multiplier of that state of head from 2 to 3. So what it basically means is normally when you're doing a multiplication effect in any sort of math, say like something with crit damage is always 1 plus your crit damage number. Otherwise, you're not multiplying damage enough. So what was actually happening is instead of it being increased by 200%, in the last rotations and the last weeks before this patch, you were increasing your damage by 100%, which means now any non-max HP, non-poison, non-HP burn, since this change, is going to be dealing 100% more damage to decapitated heads. This is why you saw on Reddit, if you haven't caught it, a video of Trunda doing 13 million to decapitated heads on her A2, because it's now double what it was doing in the last rotation. This is a massive change, a massive bug fix to Hydra. Because your Shamael's that you've been using to deal with Torment Head, his A2 on a decapitated head now is going to be doing 100% more damage. If you've got someone like a big single target nuke, like Little Miss Annie or Crutraxa, Salad, all of his damage on decapitated heads now, they're all going to be doing 100% more damage. Now, I don't know how this is going to change the meta, whether it's actually going to make it so you don't need max HP at the higher levels, but certainly on hard, you can actually hit your one key chest much easier now because you're going to be able to do 100% more damage. And nobody in Plarium has mentioned this anywhere. And this is where I was saying in the official patch notes, where I'm sitting and thinking, why have you talked about Thane's jawline? I mean, I'll be honest, if I look at Thane's jawline right now, it looks no different to what it used to look before in the game. And it's not actually impacting my enjoyment, ability. It's a little bit of more shadowing, maybe it's a little bit more dynamic. That doesn't really bother me. Okay, it's a change, whatever, but you're actually choosing to enter that into the patch notes and then not telling players, hey, that Hydra head that was meant to be doing 200% damage, actually it was only doing 100% damage. Unbelievable. I don't know what is going on in the communication channels, but this, for me, should have been the #1 bug that they fixed, considering it's the latest content that most players are struggling with. The big PSA here is, if you were struggling with your damage dealers before, expect them to do a lot more damage if you manage to kill a head. So, following on the theme of Plarium saying things that are one thing but actually are not the reality, we're going to be looking at the change to Skull's passive. So, for a long time, you were never able to decrease a boss's max HP using his passive. Obviously, at 5%, it would probably be a little bit broken every time you got hit by a boss. However, they have changed it. But I assume somewhere along the testing pipeline, they realized it would be really strong for Scarab King. So they put a condition in there that meant that Scarab King was at 0.5%. Now, they have come out explicitly and said it is working as intended. And I tested this for 5 minutes. And I proved it within 5 minutes and figured out within 5 minutes why it's not working as intended. And for us to understand this, we need to have an understanding of the way that the game code works. Whenever a champion has an ability, an effect on their skill, they get a container, an object essentially, which configures what it does. If they do a buff, that's a separate effect. If they do another buff, if they do 2 buffs, they have 2 effects. So what they've done here is they've added another max HP decrease effect. But normally when they do these things, they'll have a condition that specifies is it to be used on a boss or not. Now, instead of making a specific effect for Scarab King, what they've done here is they've made one effect for bosses, and then in the multiplier, they've almost done like a conditional effect. So it's basically designed to add both the 2.5% and the 0.5% together, but there is a condition that goes only, multiply the 0.5 if Borgoth is there in the fight, if that's the champion, if that's the boss that is hitting me, and the 2.5% would then get multiplied by 0 because it can only work if any boss that isn't Borgoth. Well, what has happened, because they haven't just created a separate object, the 2.5 and the 0.5 is happening at the same time. So instead of it reducing it by 0.5%, it's actually reducing it by 3%. And I'll show you how this is working now. Okay, so I've got to the boss now. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to attack once, and we should get basically 2 counterattacks, I believe, from Borgoth. So that should be only 1%. Now, one thing I want to note here is we can use the percentage as a marker by using the turn meter. So we've got little dashes here on the turn meter, so we can see like the first yellow block is 25, 50, 75, 100. So this last block of yellow is 25%. Now, if it's 1%, then we obviously know it shouldn't be much of that block. But if it's what I think it is, which is 3%, then 4 hits will get us around about half of that yellow block. So let's see what happens when we get counterattacked here. Put it down to 1. So we're going to get the first attack. Now, I've paused it there because we're about to get provoked probably. We've got another 4 attacks there. So we've had 4 attacks. Now, again, the line is there. That's half the bar. So if this was only 0.5%, it should only be about here. So the fact that they're coming out saying it's working as intended is quite clearly not the case. What is happening is, instead of them coding it correctly and not being lazy, they have made it so that instead of it being 0.5%, it's actually doing 3%. Now, this is great for players because effectively, if I just do this one more time now and I go auto here, cool, I'm going to get attacked again. Well, I've just knocked more of a shield off. I've basically killed half of his defensive shield, which is 15%, very quickly. I think Plarium might need to go back and revisit this because quite clearly it's not working as intended as per the description. Now, I'm all happy for it to be 2.5% because I think that's fine. It's not crazy broken. But if you're saying it's 0.5% and it's working as intended, that's just wrong. So in this patch, we also had 100 more slots. Now, the price of these slots are absolutely insane. I think you need somewhere in the region of 171 million silver, or around about 6,000 gems or something silly like that, to actually upgrade to those 100 slots. So what I thought I would do is actually go and look at all the breakdown of the costs and actually compare them in terms of how much step increases we've had over the period, as in how much per 10 has it increased by. So we can see in the early days of Raid, when you could only increase up to 100 slots, it was increasing about 40,000 silver, reasonable, and about 45 gems, and that would only increase by 5. So, you know, you're talking 400,000 silver for 100 slots and 70 gems. Fine. But then look at the sudden jump in silver here. It's insane. It's gone from 40,000, and then the next one is 600,000 silver increase. And every step after that has been 500,000 silver all the way down. And then when we got to the 200 range, 200 to 400, it's now consistently 25 extra gems and 750,000 silver per step. Now, when you only increase into 200, 250, 270, you could almost go, well, do you know what, 320 gems is not too bad. But that's infinitely scaling on the same ratio. So now the top is 720 gems. It's absolutely overpriced. It's too insane. You're basically saying, for me to get 10 extra champion slots, it's going to cost me the same amount of gems nearly as I could get full masteries for a specific champion. Or 20 million silver, which is around about, off the top of my head, maybe 8 or 9, 12 to 16 artifacts. You know, it's a whole artifact enhancement event of rewards just to get 10 extra slots. It basically means silver is not worth it. And we can see also the same kind of scaling issue happens in the vault, where we have 20,000 mostly, and then it jumps to 500,000 again, and then it kind of follows the inventory linearly. So what you end up in is a position here, if you look at the top right, is essentially you need 603 million silver to fully upgrade your inventory and the vault, and 23,335 gems. What planet are they on that they think that is a reasonable amount? I understand there needs to be a cost element to it. I'm not disputing that, but the scaling of this cost is way too high for what you get out of it. You know, 23,335 gems. I mean, I think Chosen did a bit of a cost analysis to it. You know, that's several £100 worth of, or several $100, depending on where you buy your currencies, worth of gems or shards. And the thing is, they've created a system for us at the moment now where we need to withhold more champions, and they haven't really provided a solution to actually make that work. I tend to keep quite a lean champion inventory. I don't really hold many, I hold one of every epic. I don't really hold any rares, and I won't really hold that many duplicates unless I really need to. So I haven't built my faction guardians up in rares, and I'm struggling at like 300 storage. I don't really want to spend any more gems on the storage because it's getting really expensive. So for players who want to hold more champions, summoning is a bit of a problem. Training is a bit of a problem. You haven't got any space for food. We really need to review these prices and just aggregate them down a bit. Just bring everything down by like 25% at least, because the cost right now for a new player, like 603 million silver. I don't think my account has ever earned 603 million silver. That's just insane amount of money. And just a final note of the patch notes, because we've covered pretty much everything else. This isn't really part of the patch, but it's something that's come up recently in one of the Discord channels that we have on Hellhades Discord. And I think it's actually relevant just to kind of reiterate I suppose the overall topic of this video is, what are Plarium doing? Soulless right now doesn't do what his skill says, and it does a lot more than its skill says. So the way this skill is meant to work is it attacks 3 times at random, and then each hit has a 75% chance, booked to 100%, to remove a buff, so a single buff. And then if a buff is removed, it places a provoke. This is not what is happening. Essentially what is happening is when it attacks 1 time, it removes all buffs. And then if that buff is removed, it has an irresistible provoke. Now it's a bit difficult to essentially prove that in testing that we've done, but if we compare the irresistible other effects that we know are irresistible, we can see that the code matches up. There's a line within the code called apply mode, and that is in irresistible attacks universally. That is on his ability if he has removed all the buffs. This description doesn't match the skill at all, and I'll show you the actual examples to prove that this is exactly what is happening. So I asked a couple of clan mates who had Soulless, because I'm unfortunate I don't have him to test him, to just run some tests for me against multiple buffs and using his A2. So we can see in this image here, from one of my clan mates, he's got a Doom Tower wave where Siphi is buffed 3 times. So if Soulless attacks the same target every single time, then yes, he will remove 3 buffs if it's working as intended. But if he attacks one Siphi and any of the other ones, then we should still see a single buff on Siphi. Well, what you see in the second image is he's managed to attack 3 people. In this previous image, we've got buffs on everyone. It's attacked 3 random people and it's removed all of the buffs. So Soulless's A2 is a full buff cleanse, not a single buff. And then as you can see, the provokers land on every single one. Cardinal doesn't have it, she took a turn. This skill needs to be either updated to actually be what it says in the skill description, or the skill description needs to reflect how it does, because the difference in power is insane. You're basically saying in an arena, you've almost got a Madam Ceres cleanse. Yes, it's a random attack. Yes, it's not guaranteed in the sense that you don't know if you're going to hit the same target 3 times, where obviously Ceres is an AoE. But effectively, you've got a nuker that can do this as well. So just to back this up, I got a video from another clan member with a Soulless. As you can see, the buffs are out. He's going to take a few hits, and then he's going to use the A2, and we're going to watch that the 2 Siphis get attacked, because there's damage on both, but the first Siphi loses all of her abilities. Let's just replay that again so you can see it, because it's not in 1 times. I can't control that. However, when you watch it, you'll see that there is damage. I'll see if I can pause it now. When he does the ability, there is damage on 2 people, but the buffs on the first Siphi have been completely removed. If that should have been as the skill description says, it should have been just 2 buffs removed. It's fully removed the buffs. Whilst it's not a patch note change or anything, I think that's an important thing to raise in the context of everything I'm talking about is, we're getting patch notes from Plarium with discussions around shadows beneath the jawline, and there are critical things that are wrong or being changed or being acknowledged as working as intended that are not accurate, that really they should be double checking, and it's not taking me long to find these issues out. So that brings us to the end of the part 1. I will be doing a part 2 on the specific champions that are being added in terms of their multipliers, whether they're going to do enough damage, what their abilities are, when that gets released on Monday. But for the time being, that covers everything that we've talked about in patch 5.1. What do you think about the way that Plarium are releasing patch notes? Do you think that they are detailed enough? Would you like to see improvement? Personally, I'm a bit shocked that they've come out specifically to say things that are clearly broken without even taking much effort to test. And they're saying it's working as intended. If you like this video and you want to see more of the content, then please do subscribe to our channel. This will come straight into your feed. We do release weekly. I think we've got a podcast that came out on Friday. We're starting them back up again in the new year. and we'll be doing lots of new things this year in terms of other games that we're talking about. I think Fixian has Lost Ark that he's really excited about coming up. But I will continue to do a weekly video on Raid Shadow Legends, looking at the math and deep diving behind the scenes to try and bring you information that you may not know from the lack of information in the game, and to hopefully improve your experience. But thanks for watching this far, and I'll catch you in the next video.